Hi, I'm Lane from LainTCG, and this video is on the state of the ban list as of BT17, though the ban list has been the same for quite a while. You can find me here on YouTube, on my Twitter at LainTCG, or on my Twitch at the same. But yes, this video is just going over reviewing the current bans, the limits, and what should be added. Specifically, this list is about everything that's limited. I did not play the game during the point where Mega Digimon Fusion exists, but I strongly believe that it should continue to be banned, like, fully. And I will get to the things that should be added later on, but for now, let's get into the rest of it. So, the lack of updates. Currently, we haven't had an update to the ban list in the Digimon TCG since January 10th to announce the emergency bans for Apocalymon and Anubis, as well as the banning of the Gabumon discard engine. The likely scenario, at least as far as I think, is that the Bandai team behind the TCG is currently focused on putting out new product and scheduling for everything leading into the unification of the Asian and the global card game metas. So I think that currently they're occupied with other things and they haven't done a ban list. There's obviously some stuff that needs to be banned, limited. When I say banned, it's going to mean limited this entire time, basically. But honestly, does it suck that we haven't had updates, even though there are a handful of problem cards running around? Yeah. Do I think Digimon is in overall healthy state as far as the game? Yes. I do think so. There's a lot to look forward to in the game and the emerging global meta. I'm honestly looking forward to everything kind of coming together, and the game is in a really healthy spot, and we have a lot more interaction now than we ever have had previously, so, it's a thing to look forward to. There's a lot to look forward to in this card game right now, and I don't want this to seem like a negative video. It's not. I really love the card game. I think that where we're at with the card game is currently mostly fine. And if you want to look at the things that I think should be banned or limited, I may put up a timestamp on the screen right now. So you can go there to see that if you'd like. But if not, I'm going to get into everything, my opinions on the stuff that's currently on there, and what should be on there in the future. So let's get into the rest of it, okay? So, the base Gabumon cards. These are the purple ones, specifically ST6 and BT2. Both of these cards, honestly, kind of feel like casualties of the Gabu X engine that was abused pretty strongly by Apocalymon. Gabumon ST6 feels more reasonable to be limited because of the when attacking trigger being repeatable in its deck that can swing a lot of times because it's not just once per turn. Promo Vmon has a similar effect where it can, in a deck that can swing 3 or 4 times to draw. The real difference, I guess, is that Promo Vmon doesn't discard a card, and the purple engine can abuse Nidhogg and other things like that to get even more value. I do think it would be reasonable to remove from the limit list. And Gabumon BT2 feels entirely reasonable to be unlimited at this point. The explanation on the ban list has that it just deals with cards having such a strong on-deletion effect of draw 2, trash 1 on such a low level. But since the limit of Gabumon BT2, the Demimeramon BT15 egg released, which is the one that trashes 1 to draw 2. And while ordering is important, like for the Demimera, you have to have a level 5 or higher in your hand. The logic that the effect is at such like a low level that it's so high impact is not really strong anymore because the Demimera is just so good in so many eggs. The Demimera egg is like the best thing that you can run in Machine, and also anything else that needs to pitch stuff, basically, to draw cards. The Gabumon's kind of been outmoded by the Demimera egg and a handful of other things like it. So while you could stack the Demimera egg and the Gabumon together, I don't think that it's the most egregious thing that purple can do as far as like draw a discard. So I do think it should come back fully, but that's me, and we'll get into the next bit. So, Greymond from BT13. This card was banned to limit Vaccine's power as well as Shine Greymon. I think that they were reasoning it to be specifically for Shine Greymon because Shine Greymon was extremely dominant at the time that like this card came out. But it really seems to have been specifically to limit Vaccine's power. It's not the craziest thing that Vaccine can do, because it's not an armor form. But the fact that it's a generic level 4 Vaccine that Patamon can go into for free, and then gain a memory, and then you recover from Patamon, and then play a Tamer for free, and recover again is really powerful. Combined with it being able to generically play any red or yellow Tamer instead of just Marcus, it becomes abusable by yellow or red decks with any kind of Tamer focus. Vaccine needs further limits, but this was a reasonable call to help curb its power. And honestly, if it was back in the meta, you'd see most like red or yellow decks running it so that you could just throw down red or yellow Tamers. It would have been fine, I think, if it specifically said Marcus Damon. I don't like Shine. I make it pretty clear in any time that anybody's hung out with me or anything else that I think that Shine is kind of disgusting. But I think that if this was just limited to like the Shine deck, it would have been fine, or at least okay. And Mach Gaugamon. The EX4 Mach Gaugamon is limited for good reason. I think that it should stay limited. So basically, the reasons that they outlined in their ban list seem pretty reasonable. Mirage is a deck that gains a lot of memory and has been tier 1.5 or tier 2 for an extremely long time compared to most decks in the current metagame. And the reason that they gave specifically is that because of the inherits under it, activating when a card is added to your opponent's hand, because of the Wind Digivolving effect on Mach Gaugamon returning a level 4 or lower to the hand, it triggers 2 inherits, so basically you can go into this for effectively 1 most of the time, which is a little bit too quick. And also the inheritable, like, on it is better than anything else in the deck, because when attacking, if your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, it can unsuspend. If you're not playing against something that isn't like Megazoo, most decks end up at having 8 cards in hand as a matter of course through gameplay, and because of the memory effect and because of how Mirage itself works, you are effectively gaining 2 memory going into Mach, and then you'll gain another 2 memory at least going into Mirage. So you fully paid for the Mirage play just off of the 2 Digivolves, so you're only really paying 3 to do anything. It's pretty powerful and should stay limited specifically because of that. There are other decent level 5s that can replace it as well, so it's not fully kneecapping a deck to just take this down to 1. So, the Ismon package. This limit is honestly extremely reasonable. The card as a duo are entirely overtuned with what purple likes to do. Ismon originally, using its effects, you could play out 2 Ismon off of 1 Ismon scatter mode dying, and you could effectively get 4 free bodies that can just float into each other over and over again. And also scatter mode only costs 4 to play, so even if you're not digivolving for 2, you can just throw it down for like 1 higher than Anubismon. It's extremely aggressively costed, so basically you play a thing for 4, which then next turn immediately dies, or same turn if you're using calling, immediately dies. You draw 3, and then you trash 2 Ismon scatter modes, and then get 2 Ismons on the board. So, you're not discarding Scatter, you're discarding the regular Ismon, which then, just from that play, is two 7,000 DP bodies that are just on the board. It's if it was unlimited, it would be insane. Like every purple deck that wants things in the trash, which is most every purple deck, would be playing it if it's not dependent on the spots for in-archetype stuff. So the limit on both of these is honestly extremely understandable. So this one is for three different things because they basically tried to limit Digisorption as a mechanic entirely. I'm including Blossomon, Argamon, and Hidden Potential Discovered together because they're all banned for the same reason. Digisorption as a mechanic seems pretty fair on the surface because it's, for a downside, get an extremely reduced memory cost for your Digivolutions. In theory, it could have been balanced, but it's specifically a green mechanic, and green has a lot of positive upsides from having things suspended. So effectively, it's for an upside, get an even better upside for free, which is pretty crazy. So it's like you get positives to get positives, and then if you're going into a Bloom Lord, you get even more off of it. Argamon is the most egregious one of like the Digimon that Digivolve for free. And it also has an extremely strong inherit where you can just play level 3s when you attack. So even though it's a vanilla on board, it ends up effectively being like really powerful. And Blossomon is just a vanilla. You Digivolve into it for free, but the real thing is that these are not in a vacuum. You go into it for free to end up getting like much better effects because you're using it for Bloom Lord, which gains stuff off of having things suspended. So having a Digivolve for free to suspend to go into something for 4 to get memory back is just helpful. Even if you don't get an inherit off of it. And HPD is so good that any deck that's green, even things that don't want to be suspended, use it. If it was unlimited, every green deck would be running Quartzmon, just period. Go into Quartzmon for 1, and then gain a ton of memory back. Or for Tyrant, go into Tyrant for 1 if you don't have anything under it, and then get even more advantage. And it being suspended at the end of the turn means that it's unaffected by your opponent's effects. All of these cards deserve their limit. Honestly, I'm surprised that Cherrymon isn't also here with them, because Cherrymon is a 2-cost, or a 1-cost Digivolution, sorry. But it has an effect that really makes it almost as good as both of these. It just wants to stay on the board, unlike these, which go into the top end. So, Impmon X2. It really deserves a spot on the list, and it needs to stay here for as long as Beelsmon will ever be relevant. Beelsmon is intended as an extremely high roll strategy involving luck and some piloting skill to pull off large effects for having cards in the trash. Impmon X2 removed a lot of the piloting skill that's necessary, because you just load up the trash immediately. It made the deck slightly too consistent, and then also it plays 4/3, so you can search top 4, add an Ion Mako, which is necessary to the function of the deck, and also a Beelsmon, again, necessary to the function of the deck to hand. But the thing that's more relevant is that when it's milled from the deck, you can mill up to 3 cards from the top of your deck. When it was unlimited, it wasn't uncommon to mill 2 or 3 off the same mill string, which means that you then mill another 6 to 9 cards from your deck, which may gain you memory from Deathslinger or other effects. And not to mention, Ion Mako can stack it on top of the deck. It turned high roll into a matter of course, instead of being a thing that, like, there's a certain amount of, like, elegance in piloting Beelsmon to getting any sort of effects that are, like, good and not killing yourself. But the Impmon made it so that you could mill out to the point where you didn't need to worry about those things because your opponent was dead before it ever came up. it shouldn't come off the list. Just period. It's really good, and if it was off the list, unless effects were even crazier, I think that it should be here. So, Greymon promo. Honestly, I don't think that it should be here anymore. Like, I don't think that it should be limited. Metal Garurumon has had very little impact for a while now, since about when Beelsmon came out. Though, honestly, I could be wrong. Maybe it being unlimited would make the deck good again. But the reason it was limited was because of the deck's battle protection. It could swing itself twice, and then Digivolve into a Digimon that could then unsuspend and swing for 2 checks because of the Garurumon security attack +1. Which at the same time just led to very fast wins, but due to the amount of removal in the meta currently, revolving around ace cards and other non-battle methods, I don't think that it's nearly as bad as it was at the time of the ban. Not to mention how gutted the whole line has been by getting rid of all of the X Antibodies and all of the Gabumons and everything else. I think that it would be totally reasonable for this to come back to 4 at this point, because if you swing with it, if it doesn't have any DP+, Valk just puts it to 1 immediately, and most other aces or like removal and security just gut the thing. It's not that good, but you know, I might be wrong. Grand Guagamon promo. Honestly, I don't think that this deserves to be limited. At the time it was limited, it hadn't seen play at high tier for quite a while. And it's mostly just a budget-friendly beatdown deck, when Bloomlord was expensive. So, like, you played it if you liked green and couldn't afford Bloomlord. In most stacks, it can max out at 4 security checks by bursting every single source under it, and then it's just an 11k beater. Currently, it would be bigger because of Meta Life and other things like that having lingering effects for the full turn, but I think it got limited specifically because Tyrant was coming down the pipe. When it was limited, they may have been doing testing for that or knew that they wanted to do something with insectoids. So pushing out a giant stack, making it huge with like Meta Life and other things, and then digivolving into a base 14k for 2 that could swing for 4 checks is pretty good. I just don't think that it's the best thing that insects can do anymore, though, so I don't think that it really should be limited. Tyrant, at least when I see Tyrant doing well, Tyrant is more of a, like, control, slow, remove resources from your opponent sort of deck. And I don't think that, like, Unga Bunga Beatdown is the thing that the deck wants to be doing most of the time. So I just can't really see it having wide usage. I think that if it came back to 4, it might be used as, like, a funny 2-of by some of the more aggro strategy people with this deck, and that's about it. Greymon X Antibody from BT11. I think that it should be unlimited again. When it was limited, it was because it gave War Greymon and Black War Greymon speed that the rest of the decks in the format didn't have. It accelerated you into your, like, level 5 for 1 or 2. 2 at the time, because Black War Grey was more common. So I don't think that now, though, with aces and everything else, that it's really that fast. And because trainings and everything exist now and they didn't used to. And also because it doesn't have a better protection than the other Greymon, that it's that good. Having to have something under instead of just removing 2 stacks is substantially worse than the other version as far as protection. You would just be giving up some protection to gain some speed, and I don't know that that's necessarily worth it all the time anyway. So I think that because of it not being that crazy, and also that Greymon isn't that strong of a deck in the current meta at all that really it should probably come back to 4. I don't think that it would be that impactful anymore. Calling from the Darkness. This card needs to stay limited forever, which honestly is kind of sad because I'm a purple player. Calling is an extremely powerful effect for 1 cost in any purple deck, even if the card functioned how it was supposed to. So basically, for a cost of 1, you delete a Digimon and then return 2 purple Digimon cards from your trash to your hand. And if it worked exactly as it's written, it's strong and encourages loops and does a lot of recursion with stuff like Millith Loop. But because of how Digimon works and because of how the card itself is formatted, it's stronger than that even, because the way that it's written is delete one of your Digimon, period, then. So even if you don't delete a Digimon, you can still do the second effect. Because it's not phrased as delete one of your Digimon, then if this effect deleted a Digimon, return 2 purple Digimon cards from your trash to your hand. So effectively for 1 cost, you can, with no downsides, so no deletion is required, return 2 cards to your hand from your graveyard in decks that throw things in your graveyard for benefits. So yeah, it's worth it. It's definitely worth it, and it needs to be limited to 1 forever. So yeah. Sunrise Buster. With how strong of a color combo yellow and red is at the moment, I think that the card should stay limited. So for a cost of 5, you play a Tamer and then do a DP minus effect for each Tamer you have, 3,000 for each Tamer. So yellow frequently splashes red, especially with Valcase in the meta, and it's too easy to do in vaccine decks if you're building with this in mind. It was primarily played in Shine Greymon, and it was limited before it got the new Marcus. But in that deck, for the cost of the best Marcus, one of the best Marcus, the 5-cost one that gives something minus 3,000 and taps for 1 memory. So basically, for the cost of that Marcus, play that Marcus, do minus 3,000 on something, gain a memory, and then do a bunch of DP minuses for all of the Marcuses that you can spam out. Or if you play Vaccine, then play a Tamer, because it's generic and not just Marcus, so play a Tamer, and then do a bunch of DP minuses, which is the one form of removal in this game that you can't get around. It's really powerful, so it should stay limited. Doru Greymond. As much as I would love a black OTK deck to exist in the format again, this really shouldn't come back to 4. It should just stay at 1. The Alphamon line is too memory efficient if you're like going through the proper line, from like Doru to Doruga, Dex Doruga, Doru Gray, Dex Doru Gray, and then Alpha, for it to be back at 4. Though I would be interested to see how strong Alphamon is in the current meta if it was back at 4. So basically, it gives some of the best protection in the whole game, so it can't have its DP reduced, so you can't get around the can't be deleted effect. It can't be deleted, and it gives your big guy that can unsuspend multiple times because of how this deck works, security attack +1. It's too good. A bit too good. It's probably good that there's only 2 of this like extremely high rarity version behind me, because you shouldn't be able to have a full playset of them. It needs to stay in the bin, unfortunately, with my hopes and dreams for black or purple being busted. So, Shoutmon X4. It probably shouldn't be allowed to come back to 4, only because we're getting new cross support shortly. The card isn't fair, really. I don't think, though, if I didn't know that we were getting cross support soon, it might be reasonable to put back to 4, honestly. I understand that a lot of people who played under it have trauma from the deck, in the same way that I hate Shine Greymon. But with the amount of ace cards in the format, functioning as removal in the current game, or cards like Ruin Mode, I honestly think you would have a hard time doing the OTK turn without any meaningful interaction coming up. So basically, while you can play it for 1, because you throw 4 things under, draw 2 cards, and then if it survives the attack, shove everything under something and do it again. It only being 8k makes it extremely vulnerable now that meta decks are running removal, or DP minus effects, or security attack -1 effects with like Venus or things like that. I just don't see it having as much impact as it had at the time. So I do think that if we weren't getting new cross stuff, that was probably going to be kind of disgusting. That it would be unreasonable for it to come back to full. But for now, I think that it should probably stay limited because we are getting new cross stuff, and there will be more names that you actually, care about that can go into this guy that'll be good and function for the deck much better. So this one is just for all of the recovery +1 stuff. These 2 cards should stay limited. There's a good amount of recovery effects in Digimon, and these 2 are the worst when it comes to abusable value, so they should just stay gone. The decks that we currently see that have a lot of recovery effects, like Vaccine, usually are maintaining the same amount or removing cards from their security to keep doing their effects, but these are purely for Setcon and Old Yellow Hybrid, both for an effective cost of 3, recover 1, because in Yellow Hybrid, you're setting up tamers to do plays, so that I don't really count towards the memory cost going into things. And for reinforcing memory boost, it costs 6, but you gain 3 memory off the delay effect, so both effectively cost you 3 in the long term. While I think security control is an important part of the overall metagame, and honestly a healthy thing to exist in the card game as a whole, I know that that's an unpopular opinion, but I think that it's an important part of the game. One of the big balances with Setcon is that all of your effects cost so much to do and float through things. Like the old Magna costs 7, the new Magna Ace is, fairly cheap to go into, but the overflow is really high. So basically you're paying opportunity cost for everything else, and you're taking 1 action each turn. Meanwhile, these 2 just get all of the value for, 3, and Jet Sylphie can swing, and Reinforcing can set up an even bigger turn down the line. So I think that for how aggressively these are costed, I think that they should stay banned. Everything else that does these effects is fairly reasonable when you're just hard slamming something, but these 2 should stay gone. Ice Wall from EX1. Honestly, this one probably needs to stay limited. If semi-limits were a thing that this game had, like setting the amount that you can have to 2, I think it'd probably be fair. But it should be limited in some form, no matter what. Because while it's important to stall, and it's a good mechanic, honestly, for people to be able to stall, being able to stall for 4 turns in a row, or make it that if you're paying 4 memory, your opponent loses 8 memory for swinging on an OTK turn is kind of ridiculous. I don't think that you really need to say much else about it. The fact that you also gain 2 memory off of it being in security is a pretty big bonus as well, so it just really shouldn't be unlimited. But I do think that if 2 limits were in this game, that it would probably be fair at 2, more than just at 1. So, Bukamon BT14. This card should be limited, but mostly because it's too generic. If it were somehow only usable in like Hexablau style decks or the upcoming Ice Snow stuff, where the goal was to strip sources from everything, or have an opponent with no Digimon with sources, it would be fair. But because of the way that it's so generic, it ends up in any blue deck where eggs aren't essential to the game plan, or where you just want to swing a lot. It just ends up in everything, and it really should be limited to 1 so that people aren't just running 4 of them and then 1 other egg. You could fix it if it if they were going to do erratas to fix things, you could fix it by having, while your opponent has no Digimon with Digivolution cards, it gains jamming, or your turn when a Digivolution card is removed from one of your opponent's Digimon, this Digimon gains jamming. And it would be fair and narrow enough that it wouldn't need to be limited, but as it's written, and because we're unlikely to get errata cards in the future, yeah, it should stay at 1 so that it just doesn't end up being Blue's whole egg usage. Gabumon X Antibody and Garurumon X Antibody. These cards deserve their limit and deserve to stay here. So the amount of trashing and draw that the whole line can do is frankly absurd, and the amount of decks in purple that they fueled was surprising for me at the time because I wasn't really expecting it or searching into future meta quite as much. Who knew that the best bottom end for Beelstar or Apocalymon or anything else purple was Gabumon Garurumon? Well, honestly, most of the meta did before it hit stateside, but, you know, still. The fact that it doesn't need to purge sources as well to give protection while chipping your opponent is just a bonus because it bottom decks cards from your trash instead of removing sources from under like Greymon does. And it's just a little bit too abusable in a discard engine to be able to throw things from your trash to the bottom. So yeah, it should stay gone. They should do some new ones so that the line has some that aren't the old ones. I would love to see Metal Garurumon being a deck again, but yeah, no, not this way. Apocalymon, limited, banned, either's fine. It needs to be one though. I'm surprised that it didn't catch a like full-on ban in the same way that Mega Digimon Fusion did. But the amount of strong on-play effects from level 6 and lower cards now that aces are ubiquitous, and how easy it is to set up your own trash to play it for 3, it just can't be allowed to exist in the game in any meaningful way. This is also the only card that Bandai has officially apologized for, and honestly, they apologized for good reason. So if you don't know what it does, because it got limited really quickly, when it would be played, you can place up to 3 Dark Master trait cards with different names from your battle area or trash under it to reduce the play cost by 4 for each one. So effectively, you play it for 3. And then at the end of your turn, by placing a 1 level 6 or lower card from your trash as its bottom Digivolution card, you activate one of the on-play cards, or on-play effects from one of those cards. And then at the end of your turn, you then trash the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck for each thing in sources. So the first turn that you get it out, your opponent mills 10 cards from their deck, which is too many cards for the effect. If it was just 1, it would probably be a bit more fair, but yeah, no. The way that it is now is just extremely unreasonable. I love mill as a strategy, honestly. I like Millith is one of my favorite decks, period. And I want mill to be strong as like a game win kind of thing, but it shouldn't look like this. There should be something else other than the like Agumon line that does milling that's actually effective. But Apocalymon is too good, and on-play effects are now too generic for things that are level 6 or under for this to exist at all. And Anubismon. So the last card in the ban list, other than Mega Digimon Fusion, which I can't really comment on very much, is my favorite card in the game entirely. Unfortunately, I can't play the deck anymore, but I do think that Anubis could be unlimited again without huge negative consequences at the current moment with the overall metagame. That is probably me being extremely biased. I am extremely biased with this deck, but I don't think that it would be that bad, honestly. That's me giving an honest opinion, not like, I want it back, please. The reason why it should stay limited, though, is that because of how generically it's designed, any strong combo that purple can do is liable to be exploited by it. So if there's any 2 or 3 card combos in purple, Anubismon can just abuse them. In the current metagame, if Mervamon was limited, it would be extremely fair as a card. And honestly, even without her being limited, it may struggle into some of the top performing decks as it is. It can blow up, what, like 2 cards from playing Mervamon, and you play out like 3 or 4 guys in one turn, which is pretty big. But I don't know that it would be extremely good into like Numamon or Vaccine or other things that are just faster than it. The real big issue with it is that anytime like future purple stuff is printed that's good, it people will find new ways to abuse it. So it should be limited because of that, as much as I want it to be back. And honestly, if both the Ison cards were ever taken off the limited list, Anubismon would abuse the hell out of that immediately. So, yeah, no. This card can be a menace, and it really should stay limited because it could effectively be such a big menace. So, yeah. I think that it would be fine if it was in exactly now, but I don't know in future if it was, unlimited, if it would be quite as okay for the metagame. So, what should currently be limited? If I somehow got to choose the upcoming limited list, it would probably go as follows. So, personally, I would like to make it so that you can only run 4 cards with Bukamon across both cards, and choose whichever ones you like for whatever deck. But if you couldn't do that, limit promo Bukamon to 1, because it's the one that's frequently abused by top tier decks, while the other ones just smooth out lower tier decks, like tier 1.5 or tier 2 decks. I think that the search top 3, grab a Digimon or Tamer is very useful for like decks that are lower cut, but the one that you see frequently abused by top tier decks like Numamon or Blue Hybrid is specifically the gain 1 memory one, because everything else just doesn't have the space to justify for it. So I think that limiting that one to 1 would be fine. And then I think the Patamon from the Vaccine engine should be limited to 1, because with Bukamon Limited it becomes the most potent generic engine in the card game, with a deck that can back it up, because Vaccine armor is crazy strong no matter how you cut it, and if Patamon was limited to 1, it might gut what that deck could do, but also it's a deck that gets free value for nothing, so it should be gutted realistically, because otherwise it would just be tier 1 and nothing else could keep up with it in the same way. And then for the Nume Bukamon deck in particular, Bukamon may be enough to drop its results to similar level with the other like contenders level decks like tier 1.5 or tier 2. But if it was still good, I think that limiting Numamon X to 1 would probably kneecap its consistency enough to make it fair, so you couldn't be floating into everything else for free. But if they wanted to limit its ability to create hard board states to get out of, limiting RB1 Monzemon and forcing players to use BT14 Monzemon that doesn't give the minus 3000 DP and sec minus 1 would also work. So if you haven't seen the BT14 Monzemon, it's an armor form one, digivolves for the same cost as the RB1 one does, and you can also play it from your hand the same way that you can the RB1 Monzemon, so effectively for 5 by tucking a Numamon from your trash under, and it also has an inheritable that gives sec plus 1 to the same stuff. The only difference is that it does not give the minus 3000 DP and sec minus 1, and also that, it's just more fair. It does have armor form, so technically if it would die, you would then still have a Numamon on board, but I think that is preferable to the other effects. So I think that limiting either of those to 1 would make the deck more fair overall. So, yeah. I moved my little PNG tuber as well, because I made this meme, and I wanted to give credit to the person who did the Bukamon drawing on the bottom right, and my PNG tuber avatar covered it up. So credit to Mario Sonic 2987 from DeviantArt for the drawing on the bottom right. They're on DeviantArt. I found them because they're one of the very few people who has an Bukamon with a clear background, and I like to give respect to artists here. So thank you for your art. Appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoy the memes. I haven't been acknowledging any of the memes in the background, but I just wanted to do that for the second just for that. So, and off to the end. Let's see. So, moving back over here. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe or share with your community. Overall, I think that the current ban and limit list is pretty fair. There are a few things that I think were hit to help the abuse of specific strategies that should no longer be limited, like Greymon X or the base level Gabumons, and Grand Kuwaga, but everything else has a pretty good reason for being limited. And while I don't think that the current state of the game is unhealthy or bad, I do think that Bukamon and Patamon being limited would be a strong counter to some of the advancing speed of the meta. I know that a lot of people have talked pretty negatively about some of the feature creep and, like, you know, some of the accelerating of the meta as a negative thing. That is overall something that card games just do over time. But it could help slow down some of that acceleration if you got rid of it. Like, got them to 1 anyway, and it would do a pretty good job of flattening out the top of the table. While we haven't seen a proper Tier 0 format in the global meta, because they banned Apocalymon, or limited Apocalymon, the current meta split is too heavily favored towards 2 or 3 decks to the exclusion of most everything else. And I think that limiting those things in particular would make the game's, like, top cut a bit more healthy. So yeah, that's my overall thoughts. Again, please like or subscribe. My Twitter is LainTCG. My model is by Be a Big Shot or Arabiata Ho on Twitter. My banner is done by Yo-Yoms on Twitter. The logo that's new for this video is by Pinky Bird on Twitter and VGen. And again, that Bukamon art was by Mario Sonic 2987 on DeviantArt. Please support the people who have, you know, helped me make this. And yeah, hope you have a nice day, and good luck in your locals.